Well, hello there, and welcome to another episode of Dimwits, Dipshots, Dufuses, and Dullards. And as I often explain, I have to say dipshots because YouTube does not like swearing within the first few minutes of any sort of video that you upload. So I have to be a little bit like Mr. Rogers. Maybe I will swear a little later on, who knows. But anyway, in this episode, our quadruple D is the EPA's Lee Zeldin, under which polluters will win and the people will lose. So I was really struggling to decide, which story to run with for this week's episode, because obviously there are many different things happening in the world. But it seemed like this one kind of deserves, a little bit of attention. Plus, I haven't exactly been talking much about the environment on my podcast, so that's one of the reasons I decided, okay, I'll go with this clown to dunk on. So, the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, administrator that Trump selected is named Lee Zeldin, and he's unveiled a comprehensive plan to dismantle 31 environmental regulations, including pivotal climate change policies. So, that's something that is significant here. In a Wall Street Journal opinion piece, Zeldin declared his intent to, quote, drive a dagger through the heart of climate change religion, end quote, signaling a shift toward deregulation and also signaling that he's going to be, an extremist. He's not going to be somebody who's moderate. He's not going to, value the input of the scientific community. He's going to serve the fossil fuel industry, and that's about it. That's what he's there for. Not there to serve the people, but to serve the fossil fuel industry. And that's what he made clear in his little stupid rant to the Wall Street Journal. So Zeldin represented New York's first congressional district in the United States House of Representatives from 2015 to 2023, and he had previously been a state senator. Most certainly, his main qualification was that he was going to serve, guess what? The fossil fuel industry. And, they're brimming with money, and that's what greedy people like Lee Zeldin serve. They serve the interests of money. They might tell you, "Oh, I've got a religion, I've got this, I've got that," but at the end of the day, their religion is the almighty dollar. And it's a little bit ironic that he critiqued, climate change as a religion. Well, guess what else is a religion? The corporate economy, capitalism is a religion, profit is a religion. When that's the only thing that matters, and you're servile to money and the power that is tied in with money, you're basically no better than being in a mindless cult. So anyway, central to Zeldin's agenda is the reevaluation of the 2009 endangerment finding, which legally underpins many climate regulations by identifying greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane as threats to public health and welfare. So the 2009 endangerment finding was established under the Clean Air Act. It identifies six greenhouse gases: carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbons, uh, perfluorocarbons, and sulfur hexafluoride as threats to public health and welfare. So, this finding has been instrumental in shaping policies aimed at reducing emissions from vehicles, nuclear power plants, other power plants, and just industrial sources generally. And you can read more about that with an article by Politico.com titled EPA Launches Attack on Holy Grail of Climate Science and Dozens of Enviro Rules. So the proposed rollbacks extend to emission standards for coal and gas power plants, vehicle pollution controls, methane leak regulations, and national air quality standards. Additionally, the EPA plans to reassess the social cost of carbon, a metric that quantifies the economic impact of carbon emissions. So, again, go ahead and read the Politico article about that. Zeldin argues that these deregulations will eliminate trillions in regulatory costs, reduce living expenses, and revitalize American manufacturing. Well, those all sound like lies to me. You know, the uh, the regulatory costs thing. Of course, the environment, is going to cost in terms of healthcare costs and whatnot. So that's a bit of a red herring. People are still going to end up paying for this. You're still going to have, I mean, high living expenses because that's what the monopolists want. And American manufacturing, I mean, what good is that if there are no environmental or safety standards? Because they're also going to scrap OSHA and all that kind of stuff. You're not going to be able to have labor unions, at least if these people have their way either. So, hypothetically, let's saying that they do bring more American manufacturing back. Well, it's not going to be done in a way that's going to liberate the American worker or consumer. But Zeldin asserts that by removing what he perceives as restrictive policies, businesses can thrive and infrastructure development can proceed unimpeded. However, of course, environmental advocates express deep concern over these developments. They warn that such extensive rollbacks could lead to increased pollution. Well, not just could lead, but will lead, and already surely are leading to that, and it will adversely affect public health and undermines serious efforts to combat climate change. The endangerment finding, in particular, is viewed as a cornerstone of environmental protection. Its removal could dismantle years of progress in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. If you want to read more about that, you can check out a Guardian article titled Trump Officials to Reconsider Whether Greenhouse Gases Cause Harm Amid Climate Rollbacks. So, spoiler alert, they do cause harm. The science is there. The global scientific community is overwhelmingly, on the side of having some environmental laws and regulations and is critical of these climate science and policy rollbacks. So expect in the future for a lot of these issues to not even be studied, again, if these people continue to have their way. The EPA's agenda, by these people, I mean people like Zeldin, not the environmental scientists, just to make that clear. But the EPA's agenda also includes revisiting water pollution limits for coal plants, air quality standards for particulate matter, and the mandatory reporting of greenhouse gas emissions by major polluters like oil and gas companies, who Zeldin is loyally serving. These changes could have far reaching implications for environmental oversight and public health safeguards. You can read about that in an AP News article titled EPA Head Says He'll Roll Back Dozens of Environmental Regulations, including rules on climate change. So, from my perspective, this move by the EPA exemplifies the dangers of, you know, centralized corporate authority in government prioritizing those corporate interests over any sort of well being and environmental sustainability. The rollback of these regulations is a step backward for sure. Well, it's probably intended as more than a single step backward, but we'll see how far they are able to take this. But it does reinforce the corporate hierarchical system that exploits natural resources without regard for ecological balance or how it impacts society and all that kind of stuff. They don't want any sort of social equity. That'll be another aspect rolled into all of this. So critics will highlight the potential legal challenges these rollbacks may face. The 2009 endangerment finding was grounded in extensive scientific research demonstrating the harmful effects of greenhouse gases. Overturning it could undermine the EPA's mandate to protect public health and the environment. Well, that's what it's intended to do anyway. And it'll lead to protracted legal battles and further policy uncertainty. We really are in an era full of these legal battles and certain uncertainties, I guess you could say. Um, the planned deregulations coincide with escalating climate crises globally. So, as recent reports indicate, 2024 was the warmest year on record, with global average temperatures exceeding pre industrial levels by over 1.5 degrees Celsius. Such data underscores the urgency of robust climate policies, contrasting sharply with the EPA's current trajectory. And sure that there are studies you could cite, but anecdotally, I can say that in 2024, we barely even had a winter. Now, this year is actually a little more normal for the area I'm living in, but normally January is a cold month where I live in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. But if I remember correctly, we were having temperatures not just in the 30s, but above the 30s, like in the 40s, 50s. I think it was even 60 degrees in January, which is freaky. That's not supposed to happen. Or it was at least like in the upper 50s. So the the signs are all there with us in terms of environmental studies, but also anecdotally with with our own eyes. We can see these things. We can also read about them, of course. And the EPA's initiative to rescind key environmental regulations definitely represents a significant policy shift with profound implications for climate action, public health, and any sense of environmental justice that our system still had. The ensuing debate, it reveals the tension between economic interests and ecological imperatives and highlights a critical need for sustainable approaches to environmental governance. So, the peripheral poop head of the week, oddly enough, is Andrew Cuomo, a person who did some good things but apparently had to ruin his career. So this segment, the peripheral poop head, we're looking at somebody who's kind of on the sidelines, but who still had some influence on the system or on society, however you want to look at it. And Andrew Cuomo, like I said, he did some good things, but he just had to ruin his career. And Andrew Cuomo, he was born on December 6th, 1957. He is an American politician and lawyer. He served as the 56th governor of New York from 2011 until his resignation in 2021 amid sexual misconduct allegations. And that's what a lot of this comes down to. Now he has entered the 2025 New York City mayoral election, rather than let someone else who is relatively scandal free take his place, as the Democratic candidate. Now, obviously, I don't know if he will have success as a candidate, but it still says something about him that he can't just stay out of the spotlight and let someone else run and possibly, you know, become the next mayor. Why can't he just step aside, maybe endorse somebody else? Not that his endorsement would necessarily be a good thing for that campaign, but the point remains he should just step aside. So that's why I'm considering him a poop head. And maybe you think I'm a Cuomo basher, but actually, his father, Mario Cuomo, was a pretty solid governor from what I understand. He was apparently actually quite scandal free. Almost any politician's Wikipedia page is going to mention at least some minor scandal. I couldn't really find anything, against Mario Cuomo. So, no, I'm not just a Cuomo basher. So, Andrew Cuomo's political career began as a campaign manager for his dad, Mario Cuomo, during the 1982 New York gubernatorial election. So, there's definitely some nepotism there, but that's probably like the only scandal that you're easily going to find about Mario Cuomo. I mean, if you have something that you think is more unsettling than that, I guess you could let me know, but his reputation seems surprisingly close to spotless anyway, unlike his son. But Andrew Cuomo later practiced law privately. He chaired the New York City Homeless Commission in the early 90s. Under Bill Clinton, Cuomo served as Assistant Secretary and then Secretary of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. In 2006, Cuomo was elected New York Attorney General, which he did until 2010. And that year, he won the gubernatorial race with over 60% of the vote and was reelected in 2014 and 2018. So he was actually a relatively popular governor. Now, he did some good things, actually, which again makes it seem strange that I'm calling him a poop head. But I think the context is still pretty clear of why I'm including him here, because he should not be the one to run for mayor. His tenure over the governorship, he saw the legalization of same sex marriage, which I agree with. He also legalized, I mean, to the extent possible, medical and recreational cannabis use. Good thing. Infrastructure projects included the Governor Mario M. Cuomo Bridge and the Second Avenue subway, the Moynihan train hill, and LaGuardia Airport's reconstruction. So those sound like they could be all right things. Cuomo's administration faced criticism for decommissioning the Indian Point nuclear plant, leading to increased greenhouse gas emissions. But then again, nuclear power is not without its own risks. So I'd call that decision a mixed bag. Really, it's debatable whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. Following the Sandy Hook and 2010 Webster shootings, he enacted the NY SAFE Act of 2013, which was the nation's strictest gun control law. His policies expanded Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, reformed the tax code to raise taxes for the wealthy while lowering them for the middle class, introduced 12-week paid family leave, and gradually increased the state's minimum wage to $15 per hour. Again, all good things, but unfortunately, he had to jeopardize that with, some scandals. So, one of the scandals I didn't mention yet is that during the COVID-19 pandemic, Cuomo initially received national praise for his response. However, allegations later emerged that his administration underreported COVID 19 deaths among nursing home residents who died in hospitals. So that's a scandal, of course. Federal and state investigation or federal and state investigations ensued, but both the Department of Justice and the Manhattan District Attorney's Office eventually closed their inquiries, citing insufficient evidence of wrongdoing. So it was a scandal, but for whatever reason, they decided not to, go forward with any significant findings or charges. I don't know what was going on there behind the scenes, but it seems to merit further investigation, at least to me. Anyway, here's the big scandal, the major one. In 2021, multiple women accused Cuomo of sexual harassment, leading to an investigation by New York Attorney General Letitia James. The inquiry concluded that Cuomo had harassed several women, prompting widespread calls for his resignation. Cuomo denied the allegations, and certainly each accusation was a little different, ranging from him allegedly making off-color remarks, which, a lot of people more quickly shrug off. But there were also some alleged private gropings where he was asked to stop, but apparently did not. So, again, alleged. I don't know for a fact that these things happened. I mean, they didn't happen to me. I don't know the people involved. I am not that familiar with the evidence that was cited, etc., etc. But the point is that the investigations apparently did find that he was wrong of these things. But despite his denial of guilt regarding some of these accusations, he did resign in August 2021 to avoid impeachment and probably to avoid further scrutiny, at least at the time. But now he's inviting it back as he runs for mayor. So the man's a fool. He's a poop head, as the segment calls him. His administration's alleged manipulation of COVID-19 nursing home death data, that would be bad enough, but then you've got these sexual harassment allegations. I think both of these highlight the potential for abuse of power or any number of other things. So Andrew Cuomo has a flawed history at this point, more flawed than his father's legacy. And that's why he should not be running. So if you are able to encourage somebody else to run and succeed instead of him, or if you're in a position where you can speak to Andrew Cuomo personally, go ahead and tell him not to run. All right, so the third segment of this show is the fetid fever dream flashback of the week. And oddly enough, I'm sticking with the Democratic Party on this because I don't want to be accused of just going after the Republican Party. But our choice for this week is Bill Clinton. So we're going to flash back to one of his biggest popular scandals. And the biggest popular scandal involving Bill Clinton was, of course, the Monica Lewinsky affair and the subsequent impeachment. In 1998, Clinton was accused of lying under oath about his sexual relationship with Lewinsky, who was a White House intern, and he allegedly obstructed justice by attempting to cover it up. This led to his impeachment by the House of Representatives, though he was acquitted by the Senate and remained in office. So, my critique would likely focus on power dynamics, state hypocrisy, and the role of institutions rather than just the morality of Clinton's personal actions. Although, sure enough, a person could get into that, but I'm more interested in, the grander issues here. Like like if I'm going to critique the the issue of the affair itself, I'll note some of the typical things, sort of from an anarchist lens, right? The affair highlighted how hierarchical structures create power imbalances. Clinton, as the most powerful official in the U.S., engaged in a relationship with a much younger subordinate in a setting where power was inherently unequal. So, even if technically consensual from a legal point of view, the relationship occurred within a coercive system where challenging authority is difficult, right? So, that would be my critique of the affair itself. But then you also have what, in my opinion, is a bigger angle, which is that of state hypocrisy. While Clinton was being impeached for perjury and obstruction, the U.S. government was actively engaged in far more destructive actions, such as bombing Iraq, expanding neoliberal policies, and criminalizing millions through the war on drugs. I argue that the state policies were they were things that are ultimately going to have mixed results, even though it's all about following the law. I also argue that the state polices morality selectively while committing far worse offenses with impunity, and that's true with the Bill Clinton scandal. And it really gets to the heart of the legitimacy of the political system. So the impeachment process itself can be seen as a spectacle, a partisan battle that had little to do with justice and more to do with political maneuvering. I see the whole scandal as mostly a distraction that revealed the absurdity of government authority, where political elites fight over personal scandals while continuing systemic oppression and war. So, a lot of this gets down to the media and what Noam Chomsky calls manufacturing consent, and the mainstream media's obsession with the Lewinsky scandal served to divert public attention away from issues like corporate exploitation, police violence, and imperialist wars. People often critique how the media, aligned with state and corporate interests, amplifies personal scandals while ignoring systemic crimes. So, from my viewpoint, the Clinton scandal was not about morality or justice, but more about power, control, and distraction. It demonstrates how political elites operate with impunity while the system criminalizes and punishes ordinary people for far less. The real scandal, one might argue, was not Clinton's affair, but the continued violence and exploitation carried out by the expansionist corporate state itself. And like I said, there's there's a lot to be said about the power imbalance, um, that was part of that affair. And even when something like the drug war is discussed, it's it's something where I can understand the outrage about the spreading of these potentially deadly drugs in some cases. But of course, you also have like marijuana, which is now popularly way more understood to not be as deadly as, alcohol, at least on average. Now, of course, you can make the argument that anything can be deadly if misused or whatever. But I would say that's true of the public trust in general. And when our political system abuses the the public trust and crafts narratives that are deceptive and destructive, the government ends up looking like a clown show. And sometimes you want to step away from the circus and actually do things to improve people's lives. not be part of this bizarre mass destructive circus that increasingly has these clowns who just don't want to, you know, do things in the right way. So, I mean, it's funny that I say that because, like I said, Andrew Cuomo actually did some good things, but at the end of the day, the best thing he could do now is step aside. And you could say the same thing about you know practically any sort of scandal. There comes a time where a person should just step aside and let somebody else take charge if the person is involved in some sort of scandal. And when the entire system is scandalous, well, that suggests that what there need to be more checks and balances here. We need more people power. The public needs to have more direct democracy, and the uh, the nature of power is to shut the people out in too many instances, and that would include this effort to undermine the environment, shutting out all these people who are concerned about the smog getting into our lungs. And as I often say, if you're somebody who has ever breathed in car exhaust, it's not good for you right off the bat. You don't even need a scientific study to tell you that, oh, I shouldn't be inhaling this stuff that is making me cough or making me wheeze. I mean, you can just tell that some things are bad for you. And the idea that you're a radical or an extremist to be concerned about that, or to be concerned about the visible climate change that is happening, well, it's just absurd. And I know we live in an absurd world where money is the dominant thing, but at a certain point, you know if you want to have any integrity, well, you need to have integrity that's not about to put a price tag on the front of it. The radical idea here ultimately is that some things are, they're just not for sale. They don't need a price tag on them. And that entails actually focusing more on public safety and doing good things just in general. So, all right, I guess that about wraps it up for this episode, and have a good day.